No.
You're not tricking me. Is this it? Are we live?
Yes.
Oh no! I gotta put my clothes back on.
Yeah.
Woo!
There. That was, I saw that half a second of your dance. Good morning, Timothy. And good morning to everybody who is watching us on YouTube, LinkedIn, also Facebook, listening to us in Clubhouse. We are very happy to have you with us this morning, December the 22nd, and welcome you here. And Timothy, welcome to the 202nd episode of Japanese Politics One-on-One. It's a pleasure to have been with you here every Sunday morning without any pause.
Every
And
GD Sunday.
well, that's true. That's true. But, well, you know that everything you do is appreciated, first of all, by me and then by everybody else here. So thank you very much for this. And let's see what we're going to hear about today.
Great. Thank you very much, Maya. 202. In 6 more episodes, it will be 4 full years of going
Yes.
through this insanity with you every Sunday. Thank you very much to the audience, to everybody who's stuck with us. I really appreciate it. And I strive each week, both Maya and I strive each week to give you content that is reliable, it's concise, it is relevant to what it is that you're doing. So in that theme, I will continue today. We'll try and wrap this up quickly and get to the question and answers where most of the heat and light is produced. The yen closed out on Friday at 156.46 dollars to the yen. It has been weakening a little gradually. It has been upsetting to the Bank of Japan Governor, Mr. Ueda, who had his monthly conference just a couple of days ago. Last week, it closed out at 153. The week before that, 149. So going from a little bit of a strength to a gradual weakness. There are a couple of reasons for that, and I'll get into that later in the briefing. Akie Abe, the wife of, or the widow of former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, was actually successful, probably because she's been watching the show too, in having a meeting with the President-elect Trump last week on Saturday. So that was our Sunday. I couldn't report on it last week because it wasn't quite clear yet, but they did have their meeting, and she exchanged gifts, and she got something of a commitment to meet with the current Prime Minister, Mr. Ishiba. So his plans are changing and being put into place now. It's a soft commitment, as I understand it. It will happen probably before the 20th of January. The 20th of January is when President-elect Donald Trump gets sworn in as President of the United States. It will probably be just before that, I think. The excuse given earlier was that as President-elect, it's somewhat undiplomatic for him to meet with heads of state, but I think he's going to bend that rule as he has a couple of times already. So we're expecting that to happen right around New Year's, right before the new diet starts. The new diet, by the way, for January will start on the 24th, 4 days after the president-elect becomes president of the United States. So that's somewhat instructive to us, and I'd like to get into that a little bit later in our briefing. The diet was extended. It was supposed to end yesterday, and they extended it until Tuesday. That's the 24th. Christmas is Wednesday, by the way. I think everybody knows that. So there are a couple of bills that they just were struggling to approve: the campaign finance, the ceiling for, or the floor of the tax-free salaries for students, for single mothers, for people who are trying to earn a bit of a living. It's still pretty difficult there. So much of the progress has been made over this last week. A lot of horse trading. You've probably heard about that if you're watching even lightly Japanese news. There was a couple of tussles and a couple of fights that went on Wednesday, Tuesday and Wednesday. Thursday it became a little bit smoothed out. So they reached an agreement by Thursday and Friday. Now it needs to go to the upper house for approval there. and then they'll close down the House. So probably Monday and Tuesday. And there are also some ethics committee holdovers for providing testimony to the ethics committee. There's been some movement there. I'd like to get into that a little bit later as well. Like I said, the diet session will, the new diet session for the new year will start in January 24th. It's a Friday. So typically, and it's happened just recently now with Mr. Ishiba opening the extraordinary diet session on a Friday. He made a policy pronouncement, no questions from the floor, but everybody gathers there. The emperor comes in, opens the diet session. The prime minister might make a policy speech, but in front of the emperor, it's somewhat impolite to do that. He might do it, he might not. But we're looking forward to that 150-day session, which puts us right close up to when the election for the upper house is supposed to be. So this calculation of 150-day diet session ending around July 20th kisses it up to the end of the 50% members of the upper house who have to go for an election. Their 6-year term ends this summer. So something to watch. And it also is, depending on how Mr. Ishiba does, we suspect that there's not going to be any significant movements against him as prime minister, a vote of no confidence, that sort of thing, until after the budget passes, which is April 1st. The budget needs to be passed on April 1st. And then I think the texture and the tenor of the diet will change considerably. But I think the prime minister is working hard to kind of mollify the opposition. There was a lot of horse trading going on here. The LDP did not want to concede on the political funds. It actually did because there was so much opposition to that. And we could talk about that just a little bit later. And then finally, just in these snippets, George Edward Glass was nominated by President-elect Trump to become the next ambassador to Japan. This is a pretty big deal. Mr. Glass was actually considered as an ambassador in the first Trump administration. And as you will remember, Bill Haggerty became the ambassador. So there was a little bit of a toss-up between those two gentlemen. Bill Haggerty became an ambassador. He was a terrific ambassador. His tenure was cut a little bit short due to a couple of things, but he went back to Tennessee. He ran for U.S. senator. He is now a senator in the United States, a pretty big deal for him. And I think having been ambassador to Japan was very much in his favor. At the same time, Mr. Glass became ambassador to Portugal, and he was there until the Trump administration asked him to resign in 2021. So he has been out of the diplomatic corps, and he will come up for Senate approval. Most likely he will come in very strong on that, and you can expect him to be replacing the current ambassador, Rahm Emmanual, in very short order. As you might recall, when Mr. Trump became president the first time, he made a clean sweep. He just got rid of all of the diplomatic corps almost immediately, and then he had a very, very hard time getting those positions filled because of he didn't have much control over the Senate. But we look forward to having that not as much of a big deal this time around. But anyway, that's just a summary of what's going on, and I'll get into other details after Maya gives us a plug for our fabulous sponsor. Maya?
Thank you, Timothy. And yes, before we continue with more details, and Timothy let us know once again what is really going on behind the scenes, even in Japanese politics, I want to say thank you to Kanchu, that is Kanagawa Chuo Jutaku, or Kanchu. You can find them at kanachu.com. The company is based in Yokohama and offers bilingual services in property management and investment property. They also do residential services, so if you are willing to work with them, if you have a project in mind, reach out to James Howell at james@kanachu.com or connect with him on LinkedIn. You will also find his email in the description of the video on YouTube. So a big thank you once again to Kanchu and James, of course. So, Timothy, once again, it's back to you.
Thank you very much, Maya. You know, Maya, we get questions from time to time. How come, Langley, you're not in a studio, or what is this? You're in some kind of broken down jalopy, and what is this? You're escaping justice, that sort of thing. So just as a point of interest, It's very cold outside. I cannot broadcast from the interior of the good ship Grimm's just because the bandwidth is not good where the boat is parked. So I have to come over maybe 600 meters, park the car, and since it's so cold, I'm broadcasting from inside my vehicle. So
Very
I
good.
hope
Yeah.
that's not too distracting.
No, but
But thanks for
thank
the
you very,
questions. And
yes. Yeah, thank you for the questions and thank you for clarifying that. And Timothy, once again, thank you for making sure that you have
yes,
stable network
bandwidth.
there.
Yeah, it's stable bandwidth. So
Band.
the thing is, ladies and gentlemen, Maya and I decided to launch this program, um, gosh, almost 4 years ago.
Mhm.
And the idea was, let's do it every Sunday. I didn't like that, but she forced me to. And so we've been doing it in 8:20. I didn't want to do 8:20, but she forced me to. So it's 8:20 in the morning. Every week, we have not missed a single week, Maya. And what it means is that on my weekends, I'm still doing things that I enjoy doing. I'm still pursuing my pastime. I'm not um, just sitting around waiting for this briefing. But this briefing complements what I do on a daily basis in my professional capacity too.
Mhm.
So since most of the people who are in this audience, they're Japan hands in their own right, but it's really hard, and I've been doing this for a long time. It's really hard to get a pulse and a sense of what's going on in Japanese politics, particularly if you don't read Japanese, if you're not living in Japan. So this is a service that we provide. We don't charge you for it. We just appreciate that you send us likes and love, and you tell other people about what a fabulous show we have. And you also coach us and guide us and tell us what you like, what you don't like. Please do this. Please shave your head. Don't do it this way. Do it that way. And we pretty much pay attention, don't we, Maya?
Pretty much so, yes. And
Pretty much so.
well, apologies for getting you at age 20 every Sunday morning. As long as I remember, actually, this is a compromise this
Yes,
time because first we started at 8 o'clock and then you decided that you needed 20 minutes more for your beauty sleep.
that's
And
right.
why?
And
Yeah, we.
and that didn't work either.
Okay, let's move on. Let's
Okay,
go
let's
into
move on.
detail. Yes,
Thank you very much. And once again, everybody,
thank
thank
you.
you very much for tuning in and for letting other people know about this show and this access to what's going on in Japanese politics. So the diet closed. Well, it didn't quite close down. It was supposed to close down yesterday. There were so many things that were hanging over. I don't even know if they'll be able to finish everything by close of business on Christmas Eve. But the political campaign funds law was the big kahuna here. It was really something that the LDP did not want to really toy with very much. But all of the opposition parties, and even Komeito, their alliance partner, is somewhat weary of the LDP collecting political funds when they do these briefings, these Benkyo-kai, and then they take that money and then they redistribute it to members of that faction or within the political um, groupings within the LDP. So they did make some progress there. You might remember that there were three pillars to reforming this law, and they come in different bills. And one of them is the money that is collected and who can contribute, and how is that transparency somehow certified. So without really nailing it down really firmly, there's still a lot of questions that we don't quite understand. They did decide that there would be a third party monitor of how money is being used by members of the parliament when it is distributed. The second thing that they decided was that, yes, these snarly foreigners cannot be contributing political funds in these Benkyo-kai and to these members of parliament. So it was a far greater group. It was supposed to be political contributions by corporations. So they've pushed that one down, and they'll be dealing with that one perhaps in the new diet session. But as far as this diet session, I think they checked one of the boxes, probably the easiest one, which is foreigners cannot contribute political funds to Japanese diet members, and that's, there's a Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. For the United States, there are similar acts throughout all of the other capitalist democratic countries. They have their own laws. Japan has their law too that is somewhat representative. So you can't do that with a sense of bribery or something that is just untoward. But what they've done is they've said, look, they're just the foreigners can't contribute as a blanket statement, and I think that doesn't really deal with too many people. I mean, there are diplomats that go to these study sessions and maybe join them, but even for the diplomats, there's only a very small smattering of them who actually speak Japanese and have the time and the inclination to join individual members or to follow individual members in their Benkyokai. They might just pick and choose as they go. But for political pundits like myself, there's a kaggle of maybe 20 or 30 politicians that we follow regularly, that I've been following for 20 or 30 years. So it doesn't impact very many people in denying them to make these political contributions. Probably maybe 20 or 30 people, I think, at most. But it looks good on paper, and the public loves it. That yes, we can't have foreigners making these contributions. So that part passed over, and I think it'll be chewed and masticated a little bit more. And then the distribution of funds that are collected in these kind of Benkyokai, these study sessions, and redistributed to members of the parliament, that needs to stop. And but there are certain situations where the party or the faction can do that. It just needs to be transparent and monitored, and that's why they have a third party, not made up of Diet members, but separate from them, a third party, completely arm's length, that will be doing the review and the analysis and making these regular reports. The other big issue was the tax-free floor of annual income. So currently it is 1.03 million yen per year in income. Anything below that amount is tax-free. So if you're a student or if you're doing a part-time job, that sort of thing, and your income remains below that, it's tax-free. The Democratic Party for the People made it as their campaign pledge to raise that floor from 1.03 to 1.78. And their logic there was the cost of living and the cost of the increase in wages since this law was first implemented in 1991 has increased by 1.73%. And so they say, by logic, the floor should be raised by 1.3 times. That's the logic there, and that's why it's going from, or their demand is from 1.03 million to 1.78 million. It's a very hard fight. The Democratic Party for the People made this as a campaign pledge, so they're fighting very hard about it. They only got an agreement to about 1.23 million yen per year. It's very dissatisfying. It's not fully accepted. So they basically just kind of cut to the chase on Wednesday, and they said, look, when the new diet session starts, we'll revamp it. But at least for right now, let's agree to 1.24, and then let's move on because we've got other issues. So it's horse trading. And the reason why this is so important, because the LDP and Komeito must have 50% in order to pass bills. If they don't have 50%, a bill doesn't pass. It doesn't come into law. The bureaucrats can't chew on it and make rules and regulations as a consequence of that. They must have 51 plus 1% of the vote. And in order to do that, they have to accommodate somebody else, like the Constitutional Democratic Party, which seems a little bit of a stretch. More likely, the Democratic Party for the People with Mr. Tamaki, there's a little bit of affinity there. And then the the third most viable opposition party is Ishin. And the reason why these three are attractive is because with them voting, if the chairman of that political party votes to accommodate an LDP motion, then it eclipses 51%, and they can pass that. So that's what this whole fight is about. And throughout the week, the Democratic Party for the People was really mad. They weren't going to get their 1.78 million floor. The conversation was 1.2 or 1.3, something like that. The negotiations broke down, and all of a sudden, Ishin came up as a kind of a darling and started negotiating in earnest with the LDP. So I think that's why they kind of cut to the chase. The demands from the Democratic Party for the People is this raising the floor of the income. The demand from Ishin is a different area. They want to have a free education. So the LDP is toying with this idea. Maybe we can have free education, secondary and university education for all people. This is the hallmark issue for Ishin. And then between the two of them, it's, let's this gasoline tax, this gasoline subsidy that we've been implementing over and over again. It just ended this last week. They need to reinitiate it. Let's get rid of that. Let's make the cost of gasoline maybe artificially lower by the Japanese government implementing this subsidy that's going to be more permanent rather than having it ongoing and then the cost of fuel going up and down. The fact of the matter is that the cost of fuel has increased so much that it's incited more inflation. The Bank of Japan had a meeting just this last week. They have a meeting at the end of every month. This one was a little bit accelerated because end of the year, but they had their meeting this last week. There was a lot of anticipation that Mr. Ueda might increase the interest rate, and he didn't do that. And as a consequence of that, the yen ended weaker than it normally would have. So it went from 153 last week to 156 this week, and much of that, the reasoning for the weakness is because the Bank of Japan did not take action that was anticipated, and the explanation from the Bank of Japan governor was inflation is becoming a little bit more the inflation for this last month was 2.7. It was supposed to be 2.6. It was much lower the month beforehand, and so now we see this trend. It's going up. Much of that blame was put onto the cost of heating and gasoline and fresh food. So it has tampered down the amount of economic activity for the people. And so this supplemental budget, which was the main reason for having the extraordinary diet session, which was passed last week. You might remember in our briefing last week, the supplemental budget was passed, and then we had all of these other issues, the constitution, the campaign financing, and the establishing the floor of tax-free income, a couple of issues there, the ethics committee meetings. So those came after the success of passing the supplemental budget. And just to remind you, the supplemental budget was larger than the supplemental budget that was passed last year, 13 billion yen, just a tremendous amount of money that will be injected into the economy in very short order, certainly starting in December, end of December, into January and February, and probably be exhausted by April. So that's a lot of happening there. Let me see. We've got raising taxes, the income tax raise, and the ethics committee. So the other big issue was, if you're following this show regularly, there are certain individuals within the LDP who were blamed for taking the money in this slush fund. Quite a few of them came from the Abe faction. There were some with the Nikai faction, and many of them have already been identified. When this story first broke, the Secretary General insisted that all members of the LDP publish how much money they received without reporting it, how much they received, when did they receive it, that sort of thing. They put a cap on it. It's this whole scheme has been going on for 20 years, but they put a cap on it for the last 3.5 years. How much money did you receive? And that net swooped in, and it got plenty of members from the lower house, plenty of members from the upper house. And then this big brouhaha happened under the Kishida administration. There was a closing of the house. There was a cleansing. Mr. Ishibe became prime minister as a consequence, and that's where we are right now. But with Mr. Ishiba trying to cleanse the LDP, he is instructed, and the ethics committees of the lower house and the upper house have also revamped their investigation so that the people who were blamed for taking this money and putting it in their pocket and not telling anybody about it actually report. So they had closed door meetings last week. They had quite a few, maybe 25 or 26 members of the Diet kind of testifying. It wasn't in an open session. It wasn't under oath. It was in a closed door session. They didn't finish all of it, but the important part here is that the upper house election is going to happen within the next 6 or 7 months. And these members who have taken money and put it in their pocket and not reported it are really at risk for being elected. So the prime minister said, if you took money, if you're in the upper house and you took money, you belong to the LDP, and you don't attend and you don't participate in these ethics committee hearings, the LDP will not support you in your next election campaign. So either you do it or you go on your own. You don't have an LDP endorsement when the elections come up. So they weren't able to finish it all on tomorrow, Monday, and Tuesday, the last day of this Diet session. There will be testimony. I'm not sure how many are going to be testifying. I think there are 4 to appear on the 25th. Let me see. There are 23 in the upper house who need to explain what it is that they did. And as a consequence of a lot of different things, horse trading, that sort of thing, they've made it into an open session. So now other people will be able to observe and hear and listen to these people. They have maybe 35 or 45 minutes to make this explanation. It's kind of a house clearing, a cleansing of the soul, if you will. There was 4 members last week, and it was pretty revealing to listen to them talk about the money that they received and why they received it. And they were told by somebody upstairs that you're supposed to receive it, and it's already been cleared. You don't have to report it. We've already run it through the legal counsel, and so you just be quiet about it. And that is basically the explanation. So when that sort of thing happens, it keeps going upstairs. So who told you? When did they tell you? And that investigation will continue. But as we frequently know in Japanese politics, it's, the older you get, the more prominent you become, and the big dogs in the LDP and in Japanese politics in general are those people who have survived several successive elections. So 10, 11, 12 successive elections. That means you're really at the top of your game. You're probably towards retirement, maybe 65, 70 years old at that point in time. So I think that dirty laundry will come out in the wash these next couple of days, and then retribution will be had in the new Diet session. So there's a lot to anticipate there. Let me see. The Diet session will end on July 20th. So it's a constitutional mandated time. The Diet must have a Diet session starting in January. It must start in January, according to the Constitution. It runs for 150 days. And every 3 years, 50% of the upper house goes up for election. That election is this year in the summer. And it can fluctuate a little bit, but for this Diet session to end on July 20th means that it is likely that it will end, and then the election for the upper house will begin. So it's not disrupting when the Diet is in session. In fact, they can't have an election when the Diet is in session. They have to close it down and open up for the election. And in the upper house, I think it's a 20-day election cycle. And the opportunity, depending on what happens now. So a lot of people understand that Mr. Ishiba is not Mr. Kishida. He's not as skillful. He's not as practiced. He's not as articulate. He's not as presentable as Mr. Kishida was. Mr. Kishida was the longest serving foreign minister in post-war Japanese history. So he's good at what he does. Mr. Ishiba is more of a homegrown politician. His favorite politician is Kakue Tanaka. Kakue Tanaka espoused the election districts in the Netherlands, in the the faraway places from the main cities. He was always promoting that, building roads and highways and bridges, that sort of thing. And Mr. Ishiba is similar to that. He wants to expand the economic activities of the smaller regions within Japan and boost those up and increase the population and to stymie the trend of all of the young people coming into the major cities. Um, so it's hard to say how long he's going to survive as prime minister, but he's got some detractors. In his group, in his cadre of people who made him prime minister, there's Mr. Suga, and if you see Mr. Suga on television at any time over the last couple of months, he looks to be a vacant representation of what he used to be. He doesn't exude the energy. He doesn't have the life force that he once had. Mr. Kishida is also in this group, and Mr. Kishida has been extremely quiet and very polite, allowing Mr. Ishiba to run the show, but he's in the background, and many pundits are observing that probably there will be no horse trading getting Mr. Ishiba out until the diet passes the budget. That's the number one piece of business to happen in the formal diet every year. They need to pass it by April 1st. But after that, then the gloves come off and it becomes a little bit more rambunctious. Many people have said that Mr. Ishiba has a short time span, and who would be the most prominent, the most likely person to come back. And since Mr. Abe did it once, why can't Mr. Kishida do it as well? So there's that theme that's going on. But it's hard to say, and I don't want to say or project too much, but I think that there's going to be a very, very active spring from April until the diet closes. And it is possible that whoever the prime minister is at the end of the diet session, that there could be a closing of the House so that there's a double election. That means that the House closes the regular session for the upper house. It is established when that election would be, and you have a longer time period for that election period. And then the lower house has a shorter time period, so there would be a closing of the House. The prime minister would close down the House, and he would establish the election for the lower house. All of the lower house will be on the same date as the election for the upper house. That's happened several times, maybe 5 times in post-war history. It is a very effective way of increasing your weight depending on who is calling the House. So, for example, if there's a no confidence motion, the opposition party could move in very quickly, as they did this last election, swoop up and take a lot of the disaffected LDP members. Alternatively, the LDP could, on their own volition, the prime minister, whoever that might be, timing it and saying that there's a lot of wind in our sails. We've made a lot of progress. We've got a couple of good things that have happened to the economy in regional defense policy, that sort of thing. So we're going to look good. Let's close it down now. We'll have both houses. And at the end of the day, the LDP comes back with a resounding victory. That is the gamble. So a lot to watch there. We're going to keep our eye on it and report to you. So please stay tuned to that. The other issue is on the defense spending. As you know, the Japanese government under Mr. Kishida, formerly it was an Abe idea, but it turned into Mr. Kishida to make this decision that they would raise the national defense budget from 1% of gross domestic product to 2%. That's a big deal. It was formalized by Mr. Kishida. It's been in discussion for quite a while. And that has been going on for the last 2 years. We're in year 3 right now. And they've never really identified the way that they're going to pay for that. Going from 1% of GDP to 2% of GDP is a huge move. And how do you pay for it? You raise consumption taxes, you raise corporate taxes. There's lots of things you could do. But what we know right now, and there's been some discussion this last week on it, is let's raise the tobacco tax. We knew that they were going to do that. Everybody loves to hate tobacco, so let's hit them. and let's raise the income tax for corporations. Income tax for individuals, let's push that off. It was on the table. They decided to push it off until 2027. They're going to just kick that ball down the road. I think it's inevitable that it's going to happen. And also the consumption tax, currently at 10%. I think they're allergic to raising that. The economy would just take a tumble if they did. But they are talking about how to generate this to supplement the defense spending. There are also assets that the Japanese government holds: harbors, buildings, forests, um, uh, land that's being used for farming that belongs to the Japanese government. Selling off some of that is another way that they've been considering. So we don't have the full definition of how they're going to come up with this additional funding. It's still under discussion, but I think probably in this next diet, probably in certainly by April, we're going to know with real clarity um, how they're going to pay for that. And as I was talking earlier about the Bank of Japan meeting, inflation continues to be a worrying weight on the economy. Mr. Ueda, the Bank of Japan governor, had a meeting, 2-day meeting, ended on Thursday. He usually talks about inflation, the inflation rate, and is he going to increase the interest rate? And the Fed in the United States also had some action earlier this week, and it made the Bank of Japan governor pause a little bit, and he's not very aggressive. He's not moving forward, and the markets reacted to that. The other thing is that the consumer prices, as I mentioned earlier, for this last month, we don't have them for December yet, but for this last month in November, we're at 2.7% increase. And this was greater than what was in October. In October, it was 2.3, and they were hoping to keep it 2.3. The target is 2%, as you know. And it just is pushing itself up, and that's because of not just energy prices, but predominantly because of energy prices. Japan, as you know, is importing most of their energy. They don't produce it. And so the Bank of Japan has a hard time for this managing this. So they will continue with monetary easing probably until January or February, but certainly by March, you can expect to see some action going on there, and it will impact the economy. Let me see what else is going on here. The other kind of interesting thing that's hit my radar is crime in Japan. So I think crime globally has somewhat increased, and it happens a lot with the younger people. So the median age of crime has increased, and a lot of it has to do with just this social fabric kind of being in a transition due to social media and access to information and a lot of different things. Uh, just the whole fabric of society has changed quite a bit, and it's happened in Japan as well. So crime, in fact, is on the rise. And whenever you get into a discussion like this, there's always the question: is crime actually rising, or is the propensity of reporting to increase on crime? Is there more reporting? Is there better reporting? Is there better police work? It's the same level of crime, isn't it? It's just being reported differently. And I think that there might be some of that there, but I also think that there's a lot more crime that's occurring in Japan, and the statistics prove that out. So the Japanese government white paper was produced just this last week, reported that although there was a gradual decline in crime from 2003 to 2022, in fact, there was post-war lows of crime in 2015 and 2021. But now law enforcement action against individuals, not corporations, and not other crimes against individuals, in 2023 was 183,269 individual cases, and that's 8.2% up from 2022. And this is the first increase in 19 years where the crime rate has risen so precipitously. And of the crimes that have been occurring, non-consensual intercourse has risen by 63.8% from 2023. That's a huge increase. The actual numbers reported in the white paper are 1,237. So it's not such a huge number with a population like Japan, but still it's indicative of something that's going on in society or in the reporting or in the police work. But for that to be such a huge increase, 63.8% increase from the year earlier, you've got to think that something else is going on. Indecent assault is up 29.5%. And they say that that's probably because of the age of consent has risen over or has decreased over the last couple of years. So now the age of adulthood has decreased, as you know. And probably they acknowledge that probably it's improved reporting or the environment for reporting. So typically in Japan, the way that they do police work here is they have a koban, they have a police network in all of the neighborhoods, and probably the reporting and the training of police for responding to incidents of harassment. So you might remember a couple of years ago there was many stalking cases where somebody would report, "I'm being stalked. This guy is following me," and the police wouldn't do anything about it, and then a murder occurred, and the police got a lot of criticism for that. And I think they've probably battened that down a little bit, and that might be part of it. But child abuse, cybercrime, and cannabis control have been three areas of pronounced increase. These are the highest in the last couple of years. In cannabis control, in fact, 19.5% increase from just the year earlier. And of people from the age of 20 to 29, they consist of at least 50% of the cannabis control violations. And that's more than 8,000 people in this last year have been arrested for that. Foreign residents and visitors being accused or arrested or being charged with the crime is up 20%. That's about 1,500 people have been who are foreign residents or foreign visitors being involved in crime. Interestingly, in 2023, 10% of all new inmates are women, and that's a market increase than earlier. So women as people who have been charged with a crime, found guilty, and go to prison, 10% of those are now all women. And the interesting fact here is that about a quarter of them are 65 years and older, whereas with men, that ratio is 13%. So I don't know, somebody should do a PhD dissertation on that, but it's just an interesting fact that the crime rate for women has increased. And of that increase, a large percentage of the criminals, those people who are going to jail, are women who are 65 years and older, whereas the men are holding steady at around 13% at that same age group. And then finally, Maya, one of the favorite topics we have is tourism and the number of visitors that come to Japan. And I think it's unavoidable. You can't escape it if you live in Tokyo, Nagoya, Osaka, Sapporo. The number of foreigners that are coming to Japan is just huge. And this year you will break another record. We'll break another record. The record set was in 2019, just before COVID hit. And so that is kind of the bellwether mark that people are looking at. So in this last 11 months, we don't have the figures for December, but there were 33.4 million visitors in the last 11 months. And in November, there were 3.19 million visitors. In October, there was 3.3. So October had a larger number, and in fact, it was the highest number of visitors on record in October, just 2 months ago, at 3.31 million visitors. Just the last month, it was 3.19. So already this year will break the record established in 2019 2019 it was 31.9 million just before COVID hit. And so I think right now this has been a watershed year for foreigners to come. And they say that part of the reason is revenge tourism, that people just didn't have enough opportunity to travel during COVID, and finally they've got this. And I know that this is pronounced in China as well. People were just in lockdown, and now they have an ability to travel. But also, it's the yen. The yen is very weak right now, and you'll hear people talk about how wonderful it is in Japan and how cheap it is, and the food is really great. And I didn't spend that much money, and so we bought more than we thought we would buy. That sort of thing going on. So it's a very exciting time to be in Japan, not just politically, but also socially, culturally. There are a lot of things going on, but plenty of us to talk about. And I'd like to move now into the Q&A portion of our briefing, Maya. And thank you once again, everybody, for staying tuned and for feeding your questions to Maya, and also just engaging in this conversation. I very much appreciate that you are as interested in what's going on in Japan as everybody else here is. Thank you very much. Thank you, Maya.
And thank you, Timothy. Wow, what a presentation today. And well, we're getting close to the holidays, but it seems that there is always a lot to talk about when it comes to politics, the economy, and also defense and taxes and so on. So we have quite a few questions. Before I go into them, I want to say thank you to our other sponsor, the other wonderful sponsor we have, Houze, that is Houze Inc. They also offer bilingual services in real estate property, but mostly what they do is construction and renovations. They also do commercial building design. So if you have any questions about projects that you might have in mind, or if you have a project, a concrete project in mind, please reach out to Hana Urushizawa Howell. You can find her on LinkedIn. You can also find the contact details of Hana in our video, the description of the video on YouTube. And I will tell you just right now, her email address is hana@kanchu.com. So she represents both companies, and well, I do encourage you to reach out to her and talk with her if you have projects in the field of the construction and renovations and commercial building construction. So, Timothy, we're going back. You disappeared, so I
Did I
just put
scare you?
myself. You did. Yes, you did scare me. So thank you for coming back. It's nice to see you on the screen. And, well, let's go into the questions. The first two questions came early this morning from Byron. Thank you very much, Byron Johnston. I'm going to read them to you, Timothy. You touched upon one of them in the beginning of this briefing, but if you don't mind, maybe you can once again share your thoughts on that one. Let me start now. The first question is
I'm
on.
already trembling.
You're trembling. I can see that and can feel that too, all the way across the Tokyo Bay, you know. Okay, so the first question is on the ambassador designate George Glass. Last week, Hiroaki and Timothy alerted us about George Glass likely becoming the ambassador of the US to Japan. Would you, Timothy, elucidate us on Mr. Glass and why he was favored by President Trump? In what ways might he be different from Ambassador Rahm Emmanuel?
Oh, wow, that's a loaded question. Rahm Emmanuel was very prominent in the Biden administration, and he is a very prominent Democrat. In fact, had he not become ambassador to Japan, probably he would have been running the Democratic uh, um, campaign for Kamala Harris. He is of such a high caliber and highly regarded in Democratic circles. I think when he was appointed to Japan, typically Japan is a very plum position. It usually goes to somebody who has donated or contributed a lot of money to the campaign, but also you have to have your own chops. You have to have a lot of prominence in foreign affairs or in trade, that sort of thing. Um, Bill Haggerty was kind of the same character as George Glass, an investment banker. Actually, Bill Haggerty had lived in Japan. I'm not sure about George Glass having lived in Japan. I know he has 3 kids, and one of his kids lives in Japan and is doing business in Japan, but I don't know who that individual is personally. George Glass was initially considered by Trump to be the ambassador to Japan, but Bill Haggerty edged him out and became ambassador first. And then Mr. Trump appointed Mr. Glass as ambassador to Portugal, where he was throughout the Trump administration. And then um, he was asked to vacate that position in the on the Biden administration. And I'm not sure what he has done in the interim. He's from Oregon, and he was running an investment uh, banking kind of operation. So he's a wealthy contributor to the Trump campaign, obviously. Uh, I don't know much about his Japan background or what his diplomatic. I mean, apparently he's excellent as a diplomat. He did such a great job in Portugal. He received an award from Portugal for his contributions there. But um, uh, who knows? Um, with regard to the difference between him and Rahm Emmanuel was very close to the Biden administration, um, and the American Chamber of Commerce named him as the Man of the Year, but I think probably that position is almost always reserved for the ambassador if you've got any good relationship with the U.S. Embassy. So I don't know how much water that actually carries, but yeah, I think Mr. Trump will move very swiftly as he did in the past, and I think Mr. Emmanuel is already making plans to go back to the United States, and I'm sure he's got plans for higher political office. I think many people have said one of the reasons why he was named as ambassador is because he had a lot of negatives ascribed to him under the Obama administration. He had a large number of enemies, and the work that he was doing on behalf of Mr. Obama created something of an enemies list. And so coming to Japan was an opportunity for him to expand his experience, to kind of get all of that stuff in the background and prepare him to go back into U.S. politics. So I think he will be coming back with a roar and be much more prominent in the future Democratic Party. So that's about all I can say about it. I'm sorry I don't have much more depth of information on Mr. Glass, but hopefully we will get that in very short order.
Right. Okay, so then let's move to the next question from Byron. It is on domestic politics. With the LDP negotiating simultaneously with the Democratic Party for the People on the income tax exemption base and with Ishin on education reform, is the LDP sowing the seeds to be regarded as untrustworthy by both parties, and would this lead to a potential grand coalition of opposition parties
Yeah,
that might just vote out the LDP after the passage of the budget in March 2025?
great observation. Without actually putting my finger specifically on it, as you've described it, that's a great description of the current situation. The LDP is on its back foot. It can't move aggressively forward. The prime minister has been very delicate in dealing with the Democratic Party for the People. That only went so far, and I think the Democratic Party for the People has been very aggressive in pushing their advantage. So either you do it with us or we're not going to vote with you. And that puts the LDP in a different position. They say, oh, God, what are we going to do now? Let's talk with Ishin. Well, yes, sir, we can talk with Ishin, but, you said some nasty things. And I don't know if, they've just changed their leader. It's not Mr. Baba anymore. It's the Osaka governor. And you have to deal with his counterpart here in the Diet. And so it's got some different complications there. Okay, so who else can I talk to? Well, you can talk to the Constitutional Democratic Party. They have plenty of members, and if you make an accommodation with them, no, I don't want to do it with them. So it's very, very fraught with difficulty, and it is creating that recipe for exactly as you say, Byron, a grand coalition pass the budget April 1st, and then we move into a different phase of accommodation, and it's us against you. And so all of these missteps, any of the scandals, there's been no scandal so far within the LDP, within the administration, or within the cabinet. We follow it pretty carefully, and there hasn't been. It's been very quiet. So maybe the knives will come out now that the extraordinary diet session has ended. We've got a month before the new diet starts. People will be going back to their districts, but also there'll be a lot of strategic thinking about what we're going to do between January, February, and March, so that starting in April, we can go off and create disruption and make sure that people consider the LDP as a second consideration rather than thinking of us and the things that we're doing to improve people's lives. So a lot to be said there, but a good
Right.
observation.
Okay, thank you for sharing your thoughts on this and comments as well, Timothy. We move on to actually a comment by Hiroaki on the Bank of Japan. So Hiroaki says, well, it's the Bank of Japan is no longer able to decide by themselves unless Trump administration is stable. So thank you very much, Hiroaki, for your comments and for being with us every day, every Sunday. So we appreciate that. I cannot read all of them, but yeah, as Timothy has said, there are a lot of observations there that I would encourage everybody who watches the show to go to YouTube and read. So thanks a lot for that. Yes, Timothy.
Yeah, Hiroaki, thank you very much. You're always right on top of things, and you're always contributing. We really appreciate your involvement here, and I think your point is really spot on. Everybody's wondering what's going to happen with the Trump administration. Is it going to be tariffs? Is he going to come on strong? I think this time he's not going to make the mistakes that he did last time. He's put together a team. The Democrats are not quite as strong as they were the last time he came in, and I think he's learned a lot of lessons. I'm really hopeful that his administration will really create, make America great again. That's what he's been talking about. Focus on what's going on at home, and everything else will follow. I think there are going to be a lot of new policy imperatives that come out of this, but the economy is going to be one of them. I think that's why Mr. Ueda was somewhat hesitant to move very aggressively forward. Unless you see the pulse of what's going on with the Trump administration, we won't know for another maybe 2 months or so.
Mhm.
It's probably better just to hold off and keep your powder dry so that you don't make any missteps. He's made missteps in the past, and doesn't want to be burned by those. So yes, a lot of anticipation, not just between Japan and South Korea and that sort of thing. A lot of anticipation globally on what's going to happen with the Trump administration, and how the Democrats are going to try and shore up their base and be in a position to come back stronger during the midterms. So there's a lot of anticipation.
Right. Yes. Thank you for that. Yes. And then we've got also a comment on YouTube from somebody whose handle name is Konjo Tora. And it is about, yes, it is about the politicians and the political fund scandal.
Right.
So it's, let me find it. I just was there. Okay. Give me a second. Yes, I was there. Here we go. We didn't, so this is in quotes, okay? Quote, we didn't know taking cash home in bags with us was a bad thing. End of quote. If that's the level of common sense, then they shouldn't be in politics. So this is, yes, about, well, the politicians who actually were involved in this scandal. Timothy, I don't know whether you want to comment on this or not. I just wanted to read the comment, so because it's there.
Yeah, sometimes silence is better, you know. But yes, I didn't know it was illegal to take this cash home and not report it. Um,
Right. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, in
Um,
that case, I think that basically people and the general public, they were up in arms because the cash was not reported. But since it was not reported, there were no taxes on it, right?
right.
So I believe that was the real problem, and why everybody here was upset about the scandal. It was not so much about the politicians accepting donations, but basically not paying taxes on them.
Well, I think it's far greater than that. The other
Okay.
thing too is that this has been going on for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
So over 20 years, maybe you've been a diet member when this first started. So you've got a 20-year history. And in fact, you're not even going to be receiving this money until you've got a couple of years experience as a diet member. You haven't risen to the level of receiving that kind of benefit. So maybe you've been a diet member for 3 sessions. So that's maybe 10 years. Um,
Yeah.
so if it's been going on for 20 years, that means the time that you've been receiving money, you've already been in the diet for 10 years. So you're a 40-year veteran. And the first 15 years, nobody said anything. This conspiracy of silence had continued on, and you were just doing it, and it was just a matter of course, and it was part of your salary. And then this fellow from Kobe came up with this idea of doing an analysis of how politicians make money, where they make money, what the revenue stream and where it goes. And he did an analysis of this and published it. That actually Akahata published it, the newspaper for the Communist
Mm-hmm.
Party. They published it, and then it began to grow, and it hasn't stopped growing. And in fact, we reported last week that this tactic of generating money, keep it unreported, and enhance your own personal ability to continue as a member of parliament has been practiced by the Tokyo Metropolitan Government LDP members too. So this was a bombshell that was released about 2.5, 3 weeks ago, but actually it was the initial impetus of this researcher in Kobe for coming up with this. He was first of all looking at local regional governments and how they were doing it, and then it just spread out. So we have not seen the end of it. It's kind of like the Unification Church scandal, which has been quiet, but it's not dead. And this thing will just continue to grow and grow. And that's why I'm not suspicious, I'm suspecting that this next election with the upper house, there's going to be a lot of members in the LDP that are in the upper house that are going to suffer as a consequence of, taking the money, not reporting it, using it for all sorts of different reasons. And I think the voting public are going to get their retribution in this next election. I think the opposition camps also smell that, and that's why they're pulling together this coalition. And that excellent question that was asked about, is aware and thinking that it was okay.
Right. Well, well, thank you very much for that answer as well. Moving on to the next question on LinkedIn, this time from Hiroko-san. So thank you very much, Hiroko-san, for the question. And well, she writes, considering Mr. Tamaki's background as a former bureaucrat in the Ministry of Finance, raising the threshold to 1.78 million yen is indeed feasible without putting pressure on the financial situation of the local governments. This is what I learned. Yes. So
Yeah.
go ahead, Timothy.
No, you would think, and you would think it's not such a big deal. It's not. There
Mhm.
aren't that many people that are um, reluctant to work a little bit more because now they have to pay taxes. I think that's a red herring, but it is the policy statement of the Democratic Party for the people. We're going to do this. We're going to help you. You are the people who voted for us, and so we want to appeal to you. We're going to help you. The LDP doesn't help you, but we are. And I agree with you. I don't think it generates that much of a tax hit to the national economy. And in fact, it's based in logic, as we were talking earlier, that the minimum income wage from 1990 one to now has risen by 1.73%. So that floor should increase by
Mhm.
1.73%. And that's the number. It's logical. It makes sense. It doesn't create much disruption. It's not damaging. It's not like the defense budget going from 1% to 2%. So it shouldn't be that big of a fight, but it is a big fight.
Well, I think it is a big fight because it comes at the moment when the government is trying to find resources for the defense budget as well, which you just mentioned.
Right.
And how do you go from 1% to 2% without increasing, or not just increasing taxes, but without actually foregoing some of those taxes?
Mhm.
It's kind of difficult, and I believe that the time is not exactly right for talking about that. But indeed, it's very logical to do that. So I
Well, I
have also.
think, sorry, I
Yeah.
think from Mr. Tamaki's perspective, he's
Mm,
looking for an issue that he can be a champion of. And
mhm.
this one should be easy. So I'm going to say I'm going to do it. I'm going to help all these people and we're going to win on it. And so going from win to win to win, this is a good stepping stone for us. So everybody in my party, let's do this. Let's put this as a policy imperative for our campaign when we run this election. And they did exceedingly well, 250% more um, seats than they had
Yeah,
before the election. So
indeed.
looking for those kinds of wins, those easy wins, is probably a good political move.
Right. Well, and also two other points. So Mr. Tamaki has obviously very good reputation in Kasumigaseki, and that is among his colleagues of the financial agency and also other ministries as well. But also, there are voices that I have heard among my Japanese friends and colleagues that some people think that there shouldn't be any threshold actually. So all the income should be taxed, irrelevant, of how much you make, because many people think they rationalize it with the fact that Japan is struggling for labor force, for workers, and probably, if you abolish that, if you just get away or do away with this threshold, more people will be motivated to work more than
Mm-hmm.
they are now. So, and I just wanted to share that there are voices like this as well. So maybe we're heading to into this direction, although it is not going to happen in the next 10 years, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So, and we've got another question from Hiroku-san. It is about PM Kishida. So the question is Prime Minister Kishida getting closer to Ishin-no-kai while weighing the possibility of a coalition with the Democratic Party for the People? Is he double dealing with both parties?
Okay. You said the prime minister is Mr. Kishida, and so I'm confused. Is she talking about the
No,
former
Mr.
prime minister?
Ishiba. Did I say Mr. Kishida?
Yes.
Oh, please forgive me, I misspoke. It's about Mr. Ishiba.
Okay. So in that case, yes, it's similar to the question that was asked earlier. Isn't
Yes,
isn't he painting himself to be criticized as being unfaithful or being, vacillating and you can't trust him and you made a promise but you're not keeping your promise, and that is the fate of any minority governor or government. He can't pass a bill. He's got to do horse trading, and he's got to accept. It's the same thing in other countries too. It's the same thing in the United States. They just tried to pass this enormous bill, and currently the Democrats hold sway, and they made some kind of deal with the Republicans to pass this bill on funding, and then Mr. Musk shows up and says, "No, you can't do it that way. We're going to do it differently." It's the same situation here. Um, if you don't have the votes to pass bills, you're going to be criticized for being an ineffective government, and they're going to kick you out. So somehow you have to find ways of accommodating somebody where it doesn't take too much off your nose, but you can still pass bills, you can still make progress, you can pass a budget, you can get certain laws amended, you can deal with the criticisms that the voting population has by accommodating the criticisms with your opposition parties. That's the whole thing that's going on here. In fact, in this extraordinary diet session, they weren't really able to achieve a whole lot, but they did achieve some things that they set out to. They passed the supplementary budget, which is a huge deal for the economy. And then they touched on some of the other issues. They need to be tweaked a little bit more, but it really depends on who's in power. You know, if I'm the LDP, I want to have political contributions from corporations, from foreigners, from anybody who wants to participate. They should be able to do that. And this distribution of funds to prominent members of my party, yes, we should be able to spread that out because we're collecting it as a party, and we don't need to war chest it. We need to distribute it so that the policies continue, that their prominence continues, and that our position as a leading power within Japanese politics continues. So if you're in the opposition, you want to kill those things. So this battle just continues day in and day out.
It does indeed, and we'll continue watching it. The next question is from Dr. Martina Bramswig Timmerman, and I hope that we can give you an answer. The question is that finance scandal in Japan comparable to the German scandal under Chancellor Kohl?
I don't know. I don't know enough about the scandal that's going on in Germany or that already happened in Germany. If you can engage us in a dialogue, that would be great because then we can compare and contrast. But I'm not familiar with what's going on in German politics. I'm not that familiar with what's going on in England as well. In the United States, I'm much more aware of it, but we don't want to report on it. And you know, I don't have that level of expertise. With Japanese politics, it's something I'm very familiar with. I deal with it all the time. I have clients that ask me to, on their behalf, address policy and regulations, that sort of thing. So it's pretty much my bread and butter. But I would be reluctant to weigh in on those other issues. But
Yes,
sorry.
Dr. Timmerman, she just wrote, the Christian Democrats had secret accounts for party donations, and the Chancellor refused to name the donors.
Okay.
That's what happened in Germany. So,
Sounds sounds pretty nasty.
pretty nasty. Yeah. And it's, well, basically, it's similar, not exactly the same one, not exactly the same mechanism here in Japan, but probably, things work more or less in the same way in politics, regardless of where you are. And okay, we continue with the next one from Hiroaki once again. This is a comment that increasing wages requires strategies. So you cannot just dream about doing that. You need to really build actionable strategies for increasing the wages. And I believe that's the same with other things in business and politics as well. Okay, so Dr. Timmerman, thank you very much for giving us a little bit more detail about the scandal in Germany. Well, we concentrate, we focus on Japanese politics and sometimes, of course, do parallels, but we don't really follow external politics very closely, as Timothy said. We talk about the geopolitics here because they also are related to the Japanese politics, but that's more or less what we do in these sessions. We do appreciate you being with us. Thank you very much for spending Sunday morning with Timothy and me. We hope that you're keeping warm and enjoying the beautiful day wherever you are in the world. Timothy, it seems that we have exhausted all the questions and the comments for today, so I can safely say you're free to go and enjoy being on your boat. So
Thank
thank
you.
you very much for this session. Thank you for preparing, and thank you for actually everything,
Hey,
doing everything. Yes?
hey, Maya, by the time we get together next week, it's
Yes?
going to be almost New Year's and it will
Ah, yeah.
already have been Christmas. So Merry
Mhm.
Christmas to you. Merry Christmas to everybody in our audience. In two
Thank
days,
you.
it's Christmas. You
Thank
have
you.
a family dinner on Christmas Eve, right, Maya?
Oh, yes, yes, a
Yeah.
family dinner. Also, I'm going to welcome a new family member on Friday this coming week. So, yes, we're going to have one more cat, willing to willing to climb on the desk and show his face this time on the screen.
I can't wait to see your TikTok videos of this cat. It's a kitten now?
A kitty, yes, still
Yes, a
on.
kitten
Yes.
destroying
Oh,
your house and your plants and knocking things over, and I just can't wait to see it. I will send
well,
you a bag of cucumbers for a Christmas present.
okay, let's see how it works. But yes, happy Christmas, Merry Christmas to everybody who is celebrating the
Merry Christmas.
holiday.
Yeah.
And yes, if you're not, we hope that you enjoy the holiday season. With the holiday which you celebrate, you and your family. And with this, we say thank you and have a good Sunday. Enjoy the next week. And please be with us again next Sunday morning at 2:20. And before we close again, I want to say thank you to our two sponsors, Kanchu, Kanagawa Chuo Jutaku, Kanchu, and Houze Inc., and of course, James at Kanchu.com and Hana at Kanchu.com. Thanks a lot to both of you, and we'll see you next Sunday.